The development continues. By the time Katrina and Iris came to the meeting, Roberto had left. I told them about the outcome of our conversation, and we discussed where we would go from there. We decided to include Iris as a full-time member. We talked about their ambitions versus mine. I tried to stake out a path for the future progression of Pain Solution. I made my intentions clear and told them what I expected from them. For their part, they told me what they felt about the work and what they expected from me. All of us were prepared to change our attitudes. I had to give them more responsibility and to be open to their ideas and opinions. And they had to make an effort to improve their skills and take a bigger part in the practical work. It all seemed very good. As time passed, nothing seemed to change. I did not feel I could trust them enough to give them responsibility. I could not see much progress in their skills, and I felt they were not working hard enough. While rehearsing, I noticed their lack of effort, and even during a performance, they clearly seemed bored. When confronting them with these facts, they were not open to criticism. Their response was to accuse me of neither inspiring nor motivating them. They could not notice any changes in my behavior. They felt I took them for granted and that I was expecting too much and did not show enough appreciation of them. In addition, they were not satisfied with the direction of our work and requested major improvements on my behalf and a real change in the course of Pain Solution. Just a picture of Iris. She is also a neighbor and a very good friend. She lives actually right next door. We can sometimes hear each other through the walls. As a final opportunity for them to show some interest in our common future as a group, I decided to give them a task of making a completely new show from scratch. Within 3 months, we were going to perform at the festival. Their job was to create the performance, select the music and get it mixed, decide our costumes, make the props, and do all the practical work involved in making this show. I would give them full responsibility and do my part as they decided it to be, and they agreed. 1 month before the gig, we sat down and looked at what they had come up with. They presented some ideas, but did not have a sketch for a complete show. Among the suggestions, there were acts which would be expensive to produce and almost impossible to perform without long and challenging rehearsal. We were running out of time and had little money to invest in new props. When we were only 2 weeks away from the gig, they only had a third of a new show ready and no new music. We had to use a soundtrack from a previous show and adapt the new ideas to that. We did give a good performance, but they had not managed the task. Since the beginning of Pain Solution, I have always continued to perform solo, even during periods where there have been other people in the group. I would not normally mind doing solo shows, but generally I prefer performing with the group. However, at this point, I found that I would rather present my solos than work with the group. The tension between us made it difficult for all of us to enjoy our work, and it influenced our performance. When I realized that Katrina and Iris were establishing a group of their own, working with the same material that we were presenting with Pain Solution, then my patience had reached its limit. It was clear to me that if they would put their effort into creating a new group rather than into the group they were part of, then there was no future in having them in Pain Solution. We performed the last gigs we were booked for before having another meeting. At our last meeting, I explained them how I felt about the situation, and they told me they were already considering leaving Pain Solution. We agreed our paths should separate. They continued with their ideas, and I continued with my career. Once again, alone in Pain Solution. Flip back here and show you some more pictures here. There's a picture of Katrina on a bed of nails. And this is me as the evil King Nidad in Ringen. And here's another picture of Iris. That's that chapter. But I would add some notes, I think, since maybe I should have finished this chapter in the previous recording because there wasn't that much left. I must emphasize that my communication skills was probably not so good at the time. And later on in the book, all three of them are writing some of their perspective on how it was to work with me and with Pain Solution at the time. Like I've mentioned, we're all neighbors now. We live together, not in the same apartment, but in the same apartment building. We share the backyard, and we are very good friends now. And I consider that we have always been friends, although we've been through some patches where communication between us and like the work-related issues had somewhat influenced our personal relations. But we're past all that. Remember, this was published in 2003. This is things from the past. The next chapter is called Kvintett. But before I get into that, this is another picture from the promo photo shoot of Ringen. I think Kvintett it's actually two chapters. One called Kvintett and the other called the Kvintett Experience. I will read the first one now and the Kvintett Experience as a separate recording. Here goes. Kvintett. This series of 5 installations or body sculptures was a new challenge and a completely different way of working with endurance and self-discipline. To give a full description of the work and the experience, I will begin by telling how it all started, as I find it a rather interesting story. A local artist in Oslo, Jan Skomakerstuen, who is a friend and a colleague, approached me in October 2001. He invited me to present a performance at the Industrial Art Museum in Oslo, as he was curating and organizing a Saturday event at the museum. I accepted and thought it would be interesting to create something different from my usual stage performance, as I was going to present in the museum. At the time, I was in my early stage of performing body suspensions and wanted to present a sculptural and poetic suspension at this event. The aim of the event was to bring a young audience to the Industrial Art Museum. My name being fairly well known in Oslo, as it is my hometown. Start typing. My name is fairly well known in Oslo, as it is my hometown, so the museum asked me to write a press release. I wrote one and mailed it to them. The next day I got a phone call from the museum secretary who told me they found my intended performance to be too much and asked me to give a nicer contribution. The following day, I had a meeting with the director of the museum where I tried to explain my motivations. He told me the board had decided that same morning that they did not want my participation at all and that my name was off the program. No offense. I'm sure you are a great artist, and I personally think your work is interesting, but we are afraid your performance will scare some of our elderly guests. I found this provocative and outrageous. I knew that none of the other contributors had been questioned, and that the only reason they knew the content of my contribution was that they had read my press release that they had asked for. For 3 weeks, the program had been announced, the lineup, and I knew people were coming to see my work. The fact that the board gave the organizers freedom to decide which artist they had wanted on this particular event, and the purpose of it was to attract a younger crowd, I could not see their decision as anything less than censorship. I saw no reason in arguing, nor did I see any reason to accept being excluded from the event. I decided to hold a demonstration against censorship at the museum on that given Saturday. I wrote a new press release explaining the situation. When I sent it out, I made sure they got a copy of it at the museum. On the day of the event, I appeared at the museum with a plaster cast from head to toe, with only holes for my eyes and nose, in a sculpture called Censured. As my assistants carried me out of the van and up the stairs outside the museum, we were met with hostility. They would not let us set foot on their stairs and stopped us with brute force. Therefore, I stood outside on the pavement for nearly 2 hours with the supporting crowd until the cold had made my limbs so numb that I had to give up my demonstration. In the following days, different media interviewed us, and I ended up in a live debate on national TV with the director of the Industrial Art Museum. I was happy. I got publicity, and my action against censorship was broadcast. Months later, a group of curators had approached me and wanted my participation in Stunt Club, a gallery event scheduled to run for 6 weeks at Kunstnernes Hus. They wanted me to present both censored and floating. The floating being the performance that was censored. I accepted, but since the project was going to go on for a 6-week period, I wanted to perform more than just these 2 pieces. This resulted in Kvintett. 5 installations, each with a 3-hour duration and each consisting of physical restrictions. So I'll show you here the picture from outside the Industrial Art Museum. So these peeps came out from the event on the inside to hang out with me on the pavement in the plaster cast. And the next chapter is called The Kvintett Experience. Get back to that.